This is an exercise on how much time should you give to pauses. This is a poignant reconciliation scene in a way, and you can make it as tight or as loose as the shots allow. But there has to be a right and a wrong. There has to be somewhere that there is a compromise between the sadness of the scene and the speed of the edit you're producing. Let's have a look at the shots. So first up, here's Tim, and yes, a bit sad.
I didn't know if I was still welcome, especially after what happened. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
I didn't tell anybody.
And here's Helen.
I wasn't sure whether I was still welcome after what happened. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
I didn't tell anyone.
Well, I think the cut between the two speeches, Tim to Helen, is fairly easy. Both the actors have given very similar timings, and we might as well duplicate that. Let's get that out of the way first. So here's Tim. Mark the front, mark the end, and the tracks are okay. Replace, and it goes on the timeline. So let's find out where Helen comes in.
I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
I didn't.
So it's I didn't, so it's there. Looking at the audio waveform. Okay, now Helen.
Understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
She gives a lip smack and a turn away, so I might as well include that.
I didn't tell anyone.
And mark the end of it. And hitting replace, lose that little bit at the end as well, just to tidy up. So let's have a listen to the edit.
Don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
I didn't tell anyone.
We've got John. I'm going to try to keep the same timing because I quite like the timing. Can I just nudge this forward, the audio this is only, to remove the repeat of John on the right-hand side of the cut?
Tell me about John.
I didn't tell him.
No, without a lot of work, we're into a mess here. So I'm going to have to come back, tighten it by, well, I'm tightening it by 3 frames.
Didn't you tell me about John?
I didn't tell.
Still needs to be tighter, so I'm coming out of Tim's side. So let's try that.
Why didn't you tell me about John?
I didn't tell anyone.
Just to make sure that audio doesn't bump, I'm going to put a 2-frame mix on it. Let's have a listen to that.
Why didn't you tell me about John?
I didn't tell anyone.
Yes, that's not bad at all. Okay, our problem now is this big pause here. This is Tim's original timing.
Was still welcome, especially after what happened. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
Now that's an ideal moment to flick over and have a look at Helen. Let's have a look at what she gives. It doesn't have to be the reaction at the synchronous point, if you know what I mean. We could steal a reaction from anywhere.
I wasn't sure whether I was still welcome after what happened. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
I didn't tell anyone.
I think my favourite will be her eyes dropping away from him. Here
Sure
it is
whether I
again.
was still welcome after what happened.
Yes, and then she goes into sort of reflective mode. So if I mark an in just before her eyes drift away, now I need an in and an out on the sequence.
Actually, after what happened.
So let's choose a point just after he's spoken. I'm going to use his timing. He comes away from Helen there, so I might want to see that. So there's my in and out on the sequence, and here's my in on Helen. Let's hit replace and see what happens.
Especially after what happened. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell?
I think I want to see Helen a little bit longer, so it's not worth seeing his eyes drop away from her. I'm going to his bit of action. Let's have a look at this now.
Still welcome, especially after what happened. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
Can we make that moment even more poignant? I'm sort of shortchanged on Helen. I'm not quite getting the thought process in her mind. So as an experiment, I'm going to put an add edit in the audio. It means that I can trim and repeat the sound. and I'm going to hang on to Helen a little bit longer. That's 10 frames longer, and therefore I've got a 10 frame repeat on the audio. Hopefully we won't hear that. Here we go again.
Was still welcome, especially after what happened. I don't understand why did...
I've got a double breath on the audio, which is annoying, so I'm going to push my repeat a little bit further down. That should now be in total silence. Here we go again.
I didn't know if I was still welcome, especially after what happened. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
Now I'm going to experiment. Maybe we could take a tiny bit more of Tim. So I've got another strange trim here. I want more of this bit of sound, and I want more of Tim. We've cut in the middle of his movement here. That's there. So he will start from that position. Let's have a look at the cut now.
Especially after what happened. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me?
I want to alter that same trim, and the Avid offers that by going Alt Trim, and we come back to exactly the same condition of rollers that we left. I'm just going to see whether I'm now being indulgent, whether a tiny bit more on Tim and actually take that look down from her would help. Here we go again.
Especially after what happened. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
Oh, that's quite good. So this is not editing. What we've done is we've stretched time. But in a way, I think the power of their reconciliation is coming through better. I know this exercise is called Keep It Moving, but I've actually delayed the movement. But I think the tension has been increased, and when their reconciliation happens, it will have a greater emotional effect. Here's the whole scene in full frame.
I didn't know if I was still welcome, especially after what happened. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
I feel I'm coming off Tim a little bit quick on this edit here, the edit between the speeches. I'm just going to shove Tim a fraction on. I know I'm going to miss the beginning of Helen's shot. Let's just have a look at that.
I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
I didn't tell anyone.
Even later. Let's try it.
I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
I didn't tell anyone.
That's better for my money. Let's have a look at the whole thing again, full frame.
I didn't know if I was still welcome, especially after what happened. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me about John?
I didn't tell anyone.
So in the end, we didn't edit that scene down, we actually stretched it a bit. But the scene has more energy now, so in a way that's kept the emotion going rather than the timing of the speeches. We just put in a tiny bit of extra pause from the original timing that Tim gave, just to give Helen the chance to react and let his speech fully land on her. I think that was a useful exercise to realise that, yes, we're not always tightening. Sometimes we pull things apart. As always on the downloads, both the shots and a few versions from me to show you the variance of what you can do to that particular edit. Have a look and have a go.